Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Dani, a writer and energy healer. And if you've been following the podcast for a while, you know that usually how I do this is I do a new season of the podcast to go along with something I've written. So I wrote a memoir, did a season to go with that, and then I published a short story and did a season that was themed along with that, with interviews, solo episodes. So you can check back in the archives if you are not familiar with those and see a little bit of my journey on the podcast over the years. And I do have an announcement coming up for the next piece that I'm going to be publishing and the season that will go along with it. But in the meantime, I had some topics that I just wanted to share as individual episodes. And that's mainly because, on social media, I share quite a bit, and it's just the posts are so short. And I'm really someone who likes to deeply think about topics and really just wanted a place to express myself with more depth and go more into the nuance. So today I'm going to be sharing something about what's called a corrective memory. And it has been so helpful for me in terms of understanding myself, especially those really tricky subconscious patterns, the really painful triggers that come up especially, and those situations where it just seems like you're bumping up with the same issue over and over again. And why does that happen? So I'm going to share some examples from my own journey and go into corrective memories, what they are, and how to work with them. But what I want to start out with is just a basic understanding for really how memories work on an energetic level. So I'm an energy healer, and everything that I do with coaching and with healing works on, the energetic framework. And so with life experiences, with these memories that we have, they are all stored and they are organized. We're very organized people. So it's sort of like if you've got your closet and maybe you were like hanging up all the red shirts next to each other and you had it color coded, or if you were organizing some coins and the quarters are all the same size. So there's a stack of quarters, there's a stack of nickels, there's a stack of pennies. And so they're organized by type, essentially. So with our life experiences, with our memories, we do the same thing energetically, and we do it based on the emotion. The emotion is the organizing principle. So each time we're angry, it's like we're adding a coin to the pile of anger. But it's even more nuanced than that because, it's not just angry, but it's like, if it's like a particular kind of anger, a particular situation that brings up anger, or maybe it's a situation that brings up a sense of shame or embarrassment, there's kind of like an energetic, fingerprint of that particular emotion. And so each time that's felt, then it adds to that pile. So when we experience a trigger in our daily life, whether it's something happening in traffic or something a friend said to us, and it brings up that particular emotion, what we're feeling is not just the feeling from that situation. We're feeling everything. We're feeling every memory of every time we've felt that emotion going back to childhood. So that's why some things in life can be so triggering and so uncomfortable. And we have this big reaction, and maybe someone doesn't seem to understand or acknowledge the pain that we're in. And it's because it's not just about this situation that's happening. It's kind of reactivating this whole line of situations that maybe are unhealed, and in some chances we might not actually remember the original situation, but it's stored in the energy field. And so how the energy field works, you can't see it visibly, but it does have form, and it's the form of electromagnetic energy, it's light waves. And so you could think of it as each time one of those experiences happen that piles on, it's kind of like, I'm picturing just like one of those rubber band balls. Like you just keep adding the rubber band to the outside and it just gets bigger and bigger. And it's like this clump of something that's stored in the energy field. And so each time it's activated, it's like hit again. And so it's this piece that's kind of stuck. So that's how memories and experiences are organized by emotion, and how they're essentially trapped in the energy field and then reactivated. So now let's talk about corrective memories. I came across this concept a couple of years ago on the Expanded podcast, and I will link to that episode in the show notes. And at that time, I was trying to manifest a book deal, and I had done everything right. I had written the book, first and foremost. I had gotten feedback on it. A couple of people have read it. I had done editing. I had hired someone to help me with the query letter and with choosing agents to pitch. And I had pitched a lot of agents, and I had gotten requests to read it from some of the top agents in the world, but no one wanted to represent it after pitching more than 100 agents. So I was really frustrated because I've had a sense since childhood that I was born and, destined to be a writer. It had been a dream of mine forever and ever. Had taken these big risks of leaving my career behind and taking time off so that I could write this book. And it seemed like I was responding to my intuition and following like my deepest calling, but the door was not opening. So it was so frustrating. It was, and so painful. Why is this not happening? Now I'm in between careers. How am I going to make money? A lot of pain was coming up. And so I come across this episode that is about corrective memories. And so what a corrective memory is essentially that we have something that feels so important. It's almost like we put it on a pedestal, and a lot of like emotional charge around it, and then a lot of emotional charge around it not happening. And it's connected to something that happened in our past. Could be a couple of years ago, could be way back in childhood. It usually is. But basically, it's like the narrative is the same for both experiences. And the pain is coming from the original issue. But particularly, it's like we're trying to resolve the original issue by recreating it in our life. So for the book deal, what I had to do was I had to essentially detail out what emotions were coming up. It was like this emotion of rejection and then kind of, it has to do with art. It's writing a book. And then think back to something in childhood that I had that sense of rejection for something creative, and then see how there's like these parallels between the two experiences to see essentially where I'm holding myself back or limiting myself in the present day. It's like giving us clues. And so the experience that I came up with when I did this inquiry was when I was a child. My mom was very encouraging about art. She had bought art supplies that we just had around the house. I sat down one day and I did portraits of myself, my sister, and both my parents. And I had no experience drawing. I just had like the pencils and these nice, drawing pads. And I did these portraits, and I kind of, sat down for like, I don't even know, maybe an hour. I didn't spend that long on it, but I was really impressed. Like, this is based on memory, and like I drew our faces with zero experience, and I was like, these are pretty good. Like, I must be like really talented or something. And so I'm excited. I go out to the kitchen, I find my mom, and I'm like, look what I drew. And she kind of laughs, and then she's like, oh, like it looks like our ears are sliding down our faces. And then she's like, it's cute, honey. Like the way that like a mom is like, anything my child does is cute. And that was not the response that I wanted. I wanted to hear that I was an amazing artist. Let's take Dani out of public school. Let's send her to a specialized art school. We've got like a child prodigy in our house. But that's not the response I got. And it's such a little thing for parents. They do so much every day. It's such a little thing in terms of the parent's response, but it had a significant impact on me, because I remember going back to my room and thinking, she's right. I did do the ears a little bit lower on the faces than they should be. And I remember putting the drawing papers away and thinking, that's not my thing. I must not be a visual artist. And I didn't draw again for a very long time. Still don't really draw, but I have on occasion. But there's that pain. There's, kind of that shadow hanging over it because of that experience. So when I thought back to that memory that had that same emotional signature of creating something and then having it feel rejected, I started to detail out a little bit more about this book and this need for the book deal. So I had written it in about 2 or 3 months, and then jumped on editing right away and getting it ready to go. It was the first book I had ever written. And I had a friend in my writing group who first book she ever wrote, she, wrote, edited, she submitted it, she got an agent, she got a book deal. So it's not that this doesn't happen, but what I was really attached to was getting this external validation for what I did right out of the gate. And I was so attached to that it was like, I've got to get the book deal for this book. And it's got to happen fast. Even though for the vast majority of people, that's not how it happens. I mean, most people write a book and then they write, maybe they write 10 books before they end up getting their book deal. It's very normal. But I was so attached that it's like this same thing where it's like, I needed to be seen as like a child prodigy. Although now I was like in my 30s, but still, this being my first novel, it was like I needed it to be the thing. And so I was really attached to that. And so it was like, because of the pain from the original experience, I was unconsciously recreating that setup where I was going to the authority, so to speak, the agents, the gatekeepers, and I was looking for validation on something that was, that maybe I thought was very good, but maybe wasn't polished enough, or I just, I hadn't practiced enough. I could have practiced a lot more, but I was trying to recreate that situation without knowing it. And so then I was hitting up with the same kind of rejection. And so the reason that this happens, the reason corrective memories happen, is because our subconscious is trying to point us back to that original pain so that it can be healed. So it's not just like, oh, this is terrible, this sucks, we're stuck in the loop forever. It's that we are unconsciously creating these situations so that we can figure this out and kind of follow that breadcrumb trail back. So once I understood this is a corrective memory, I'm trying to create the situation and it's not working. I'm hitting up against a wall. And I've figured out what the corrective memory is from. So I did the inner child work. I did some subconscious reprogramming around it, which you can use hypnosis tracks. You can use EFT or tapping. There's, you can just use, an inner child meditation. There's a lot of ways that you can essentially feel those original emotions and comfort that part of you who really wanted a certain response from a situation and didn't get it. So I did that work, and unfortunately the book deal did not suddenly materialize. But I was really left with a question of, okay, so it's a corrective memory, so I'm unconsciously trying to recreate it. But does that mean that I just don't get the book deal? Or that maybe I never really wanted it? Like I just thought that I wanted it, but it was just trying to fix this childhood experience. Or when when I heal the original memory, does that mean that now I can get it? So I was a little bit confused about where to go from the corrective memory, even though I've had this insight about myself. It wasn't so clear if if I should continue pursuing the book deal, or if that's off the table, because that's always going to be me trying to fix the original emotional pain. So I want to go ahead and move on to another example where the same dynamic will come up with corrective memories, maybe even more so. And that is with romantic relationships. So from a psychological point of view, all romantic relationships is us trying to heal our childhood wounds. That's what attraction is. So we have these various wounds in childhood from the ways that we were wanting or needing love to be expressed, love and support, and didn't come through in the particular way that we needed it. And so we're seeking out other people to resolve that pain that is still there. And we seek out the people who are uniquely unqualified to do so. And I'll also link a podcast below that goes a little more in depth on this. It's by design. And the reason for that, again, because our unconscious or our subconscious is always trying to point to us to what needs to be healed, we're attracted to these people who have a hard time. They mirror or sort of mimic the way that a primary caregiver had a relationship with us. So they mirror maybe some of the same behaviors as the primary caregiver, some of the same characteristics. And when we engage with that, it forces us to then heal the original pain, which allows us the greatest growth possible, because we're healing that pain. And so that is going to give us the most satisfaction. So that's why these relationships are magnetic. That is why you feel those surge of hormones, because this soul or subconscious part of yourself is so excited that it's going to bring something up to heal. Sometimes in relationships, it's just like, this person triggers me so much, more than anyone I've ever met. Why can't I just date someone who doesn't trigger me like that? And it's because if you did, you would just never feel that level of attraction. You would never have that satisfaction, because that person is not bringing things to the surface for you to heal. So it's never going to be a relationship that offers that kind of dynamic connection, because essentially what we really want in this lifetime is to find healing and new freedom from all this pain that's within us that is currently unresolved. So that's why we have these attractions. And it can be tricky, because in order for this to work, you see a lot of people who are stuck in a toxic dynamic, but there is a lot of attraction, and that seems unhealthy, and it can be unhealthy if it's not engaged consciously. So if we don't know what a corrective memory is, we don't know why this is happening, then you're constantly trying to get them to fix whatever your mom did. They're trying to get you to fix whatever their dad did, or vice versa. And you're constantly mad at each other, and but there's all this like romantic spark, can be very toxic, very unhealthy. unless we know what we know that we're talking about in this podcast about corrective memories. And from there, then we can do the healing, and then the relationship can become the best thing that ever happened to us because it points us down this pathway of healing. So I'll give you an example. I had this childhood pain around wanting more attention, wanting more expressions of love, and particularly feeling like I had to compete with my sister for my mom's attention. So then I find myself in a relationship where I feel like the partner is not initiating text messages enough. Like I'm sending more of the conversation start with me initiating the conversation and less so with him initiating. He's not telling me I'm the most beautiful person he's ever met. He's not, telling me I'm talented. He's not giving me the kinds of compliments, not initiating these like really fun dates and stuff like that. And then other people who are doing those things, I'm like not interested in. That's where you kind of figure out there's something going on here. So he's not doing these things that I'm craving. And even if I were to sit down with him and be like, I need you every other day to text, how was your day? And then on the alternate days, I'll text, and then we'll be even, and then I'll feel good. Even if I could detail out something like that, where it was like, you just got to check these boxes and then I'll feel good. It's never going to be enough. It's going to be like a black hole. There's never going to be enough affection coming in that way because the pain is not from him. The original pain is from the relationship with the primary caregiver, and in my case, my mom. And another example of that, actually, particularly because I felt like I had to compete with my sister, I also notice that that I can have like a lot of jealousy around someone else's exes. Like they, still have an Instagram photo that she's in that's up on their feed, or they just mention something fun that they did once that happened to be with an ex. And I'm just like, why did he mention that? He's not over her yet. His relationship is doomed. He's never going to be able to love me enough. So again, I could be like, please remove that photo from your feed. Please don't mention anything that you've ever done with an ex. It would still never be enough because, again, the pain is not from him and his exes. The pain is from me feeling like I had to compete with my sister for my mom's attention. So we can't fix it with changing the current behavior, but we can look to the trigger from the current behavior, map it back to the painful memory from childhood, the painful dynamic, and then start to understand where that emotional charge is coming from. So this is what I was able to experiment and do in a romantic relationship, was start to notice the trigger that's coming up, tie it back to the original memory, and then comfort myself and essentially just say to myself, I'm not mad about this text message. I'm mad about this thing that my dad did when I was 5. Or I'm mad about, something, a dynamic that happened with my mom. And then once I address that, it releases that emotional pain and the emotional charge around it. And once that emotional charge was released, then I would look back at the text message, whatever I thought the thing was that was the problem, and I would realize it wasn't actually a problem. So I'd essentially see around it. I would see it in a totally new way. I would see that when I first, read it or interacted with it, that my brain was essentially creating a story around it that wasn't even true, that was based on this past pain. So ultimately, what we run into, though, is that we come into the relationship with our triggers and our patterns and these, painful experiences that we've had, and we can engage with it consciously, but the relationship will always fall into that unhealthy, toxic category if both people are not engaged consciously. So I can do the inner child healing and shift my expectations so that I'm not, trying to force the other person to send a certain number of text messages per week or whatever it ends up being. But they have their own issues. So, for example, if I'm wanting someone to text me more, but they have a deep fear of rejection, so they're happy responding to text messages, but they have so much discomfort about initiating them. So essentially, like that's where they're uniquely unqualified to do the thing that I need. So then I can figure out where my pain is coming from. I can resolve that. But if they still have their own set of triggers, childhood memories, then they're still going to be needing or expecting me to kind of almost like navigate around it. You kind of get this like visual of someone, trying to like dodge the bullets as they're coming and yeah, like just twist their body into like a weird way because if those things remain unconscious, then nothing I can do is ever going to be enough to make them happy if they aren't also consciously addressing, okay, this trigger is coming up and it's from this other thing that happened to me in my past. So that's why these relationships that are on both sides highly magnetic also are bringing up triggers on both sides. And you run into issues if you don't have both people consciously reviewing why those triggers are coming up and clearing that emotional charge around the situation before coming back and saying, can we talk about this? Can I, for example, I would ask, can I better understand why you're not initiating text messages and I feel like I'm initiating more of them? Can I better understand why you still have this photo on your Instagram feed? If I've cleared the emotion first, then I can have the conversation and actually maybe trust what I'm hearing back because I'm not, distorted by my own fears based on the childhood pain. So we need both people to consciously engage in the process for it to work. So now that I understand that from the side of romantic relationships, it gives me a little more insight into what was going on with the book deal and how to navigate that. So once you figure out the childhood experience and then you clear the emotional charge, what happens is that you're kind of clearing out this this narrow-mindedness, because what's happening with corrective memories is that your subconscious is trying to fix it. So it's giving you this one option that you've got to get this one thing, this one book deal, has to be a book deal, has to be a major publisher, or this one person. It's got to be this person. I've got to get this person to be the person I'm in the relationship with. So it's like this very single-mindedness. But once you clear the emotional charge, then you realize there's actually lots of options for what the underlying need is, whether that's publishing a book or being in a romantic relationship. And so you're less fixated on the one particular thing being the thing that you do. And so the thesis about corrective memories is not necessarily to execute a new experience that reverses it or to avoid that situation, but rather to be able to see that there's many other options. So it's been a long time that I felt like having a book deal from a major publisher was the only way. And of course I had logical, conscious reasons for that. I want my books to be made into films. So it seemed like a more natural setup to get it that way. But equally logically, a lot of books sell the film rights, and the film rights just sit there for 10 years, 20 years. And sometimes the authors themselves have to become a producer and figure out a way to bring the book onto the screen. So it's not actually a super logical reason. And so once I understand that corrective memory and how I was looking for this external validation, and once that's really healed, then there's a lot more space for me to start to see other pathways for publishing a book, for not needing the very first book to be the one that's published, not needing the very first book to be a huge hit, but letting myself actually nurture the talent. And because also if we look at that memory again, and if I'm being really honest about the response that I was deeply wanting and needing as a child, I was wanting, yes, compliment, validation, this is amazing, but also, to have my mom to believe in my talent so much that she might invest in an art class or something like that. So it was never about you are Picasso right now, let's put these drawings in a gallery. It was always, recognize the potential of the talent and put you in a space where you can cultivate more of it. So that's what I'm really needing, would have wanted from my mom, but sometimes our parents are not able to give us the validation exactly the way that we need it. And the reason is because they weren't given that from their parents, and they're not able to give that to themselves. They're denying themselves in some way. So we have to look to primarily ourselves to validate our own dreams, but also seeking out friends and communities where we're given permission to maybe have these bigger aspirations or to see ourselves in a new light. So ultimately, corrective memories are not about whether or not you can fix them with a new experience, but really more like signposts into something that's not healed, and particularly something that your subconscious wants you to heal, something that you're ready to heal. And because so much of that can be unconscious, I'm really excited about a new offering that I have that blends coaching and energy healing. It's called The Reset, and it's 4 coaching and energy healing sessions across 30 days. And each one has a theme, they're sequenced, so I'll put a link below in the description so that you can learn more about it, see price and everything like that. But the reason that these come together so well is because in the coaching portion of it, we do kind of the same stuff that I've talked about today, where we're looking at the present day triggers and we're teasing out what is the particular emotional signature to it, the kind of archetypal narrative going along with it, with my mom as the authority versus the agent as the authority there. So we're, teasing that out so that we can find the appropriate childhood memory in order to understand what the original need was that needs to be met. But because everything in our physical and lived experience is mirrored on the energetic level, like I was saying, how those memories or emotions are stored like that rubber band ball, where it's kind of building up something in the field. That's why it can be so hard to break out of these patterns. That's why it was so hard for so long for me to get outside of I've just got to have a book deal, and it's got to happen right away, and it's the only way this can happen, and blah, 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 blah. Everything's terrible. It can be so hard to get out of that, because even when I consciously address it and look into that memory, that rubber band ball, or that pile of experiences of wanting to be seen in a particular way, and still stuck energetically. And so that's why I like bringing together the coaching and the energy healing, because we can, talk about it and kind of triangulate what the issue is, but then we use the energy healing, and that's working on the energetic level to clear and release that blockage. Or you can also think of it as almost like a program where it's like, if this, then that. This is the way things have to happen. It's got to be this big external validation, and it's got to come right away without too much practice going in first. So if that's what that program is, that's what the original pain was that we're trying to mimic, the energy healing is what's going to go in and essentially like detangle that, sort it out. And then we get to notice a difference in our experience. And what happens often is that people will start to have, they'll start to have different emotions. They'll run into the same trigger and it doesn't bother them this time. But also they start to sometimes have more experiences come up that help them understand even better. And so that's why I do it. That's why this program is designed to have the 4 sessions, because we do a session, it starts to shift stuff in your lived experience. I had someone in one of my classes, we did an energy healing that was around the sacral chakra, and we did some coaching that was around a book she was writing and, feeling stuck on something and caring what people would think about it. And the very next week she comes back and she's had an experience with someone in her life that directly mirrored a traumatic experience. And so it was like that, the same thing coming up again. It's not something she initiated, but it's something showing up in her life, which thematically linked back to the energy work we had done. So the energy work is really powerful because it's helping to clear that stuff on the energetic level. But it also, once that stuff is cleared on the energetic level, we kind of get like the residue coming back up in the lived experience. And then that points to, maybe we were just kind of on the layer of that issue with the writing project, but there's these relationships that are actually the real issue. And so we're going from the book deal to the mom experience to maybe even more experiences that are, it's like that rubber band ball again. It's like we're taking the top layer off, but then we're taking more off, and then we're taking more off week by week to heal the charge from the original experience. And then once that shifts, then either the thing that we want is suddenly easy to get, or we realize that there are 10 or 20 other paths that are going to get us to where we really want to go. So it is more an art than a science, but if you've had these painful experiences that just seem like you're coming up against the same dead end every time, I guarantee that it is good news. It's your subconscious bringing something to the surface, and that we can use this process to triangulate what the emotions are, what the real issue is, figure out where it was in childhood, and then particularly to do the energy healing to start to loosen that up and release that from your experience. So I'll link the page in the show notes that you can learn more about doing the reset with me. Would love to have you. And I hope that this has been helpful and helped you understand corrective memories. Maybe hearing my examples has brought a couple of your own to mind that you want to dig into even more. So thank you again for tuning in. And follow along. I will be back with an announcement probably in the coming weeks or months about the next season of the podcast and the next piece of writing that I'm going to be publishing. So I'm really excited about that. Stay tuned, and I'll talk to you next time.